Don't allow technology to define you. It's meant to assist us, but we've turned it into the wheels in motion that govern us. But in actual effect, we govern technology.
We're not there where we fully understand how big of an impact technology has on us people. And I think that's where my research also can contribute.
Hello and welcome to Ph.D. Hard Talk. How are you this evening?
I'm very good, Noma. Thank you.
Brilliant. Could you please introduce yourself, Doctor, without me mentioning your name?
So I have just became a doctor. I'm Dr. Raluca Stana. I've just gotten a PhD from the IT University of Copenhagen, and my thesis title was Revealing Work Obligations that Lead to ICT-related Technostress in Organizations.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for going through that in depth. So in terms of technostress, I mean, that's a new term for me. Could you please explain what that is for the wider audience, please?
Sure. So I'll start with the funny explanation first. A lot of people think that technostress is the stress incurred from listening to techno music. That is not the case. I literally had several interviewees thinking that I'm interviewing them about their usage of techno music. Okay, so technostress is not stress coming from a particular music genre, but it's the stress that occurs as a result of us interacting directly or indirectly with technology.
Okay, so in terms of, I mean, that's a research topic for someone who's looking for a research topic, techno music. And the stress that you get from listening to it. But going back to technostress, I guess we all use technology as researchers. Are we, going to come along that path of getting really stressed due to technology, or is it only applicable for those in industry?
I think that depending on the industry you're working in, or whether you're from the public or the private sector, that you will be exposed to different parts of technostress. But I would definitely say yes. Even myself as a PhD student, I felt in the beginning of my PhD quite a lot of technostress. And my first research topic wasn't at all technostress. It was something about leadership. But then I've had a personal experience where I've realized what a big role technology plays in the kind of stress we are feeling at work. And that's what made me research technostress.
Okay, so in terms of your gap, when you identified the gap, did you look at a certain region or did you look at it from a global perspective?
I didn't really use gaps in my research, in motivating my research. I was problematizing my research. So technostress is a fairly well-established research topic within my field, which is information systems. It was some of the first papers appeared already in 2007, which is fairly recently. But what I discovered was that previous research was either assuming that stress resides in the individual, thus we have to become more resilient, or shows up as a result of us interacting with the technology, or is part of the technology. But what I'm saying in my research is, why don't we look at the social environment around us using technology? Because, is it the amount of emails that actually stresses us? Or is it the fact that we're thinking, oh my God, I need to relate to all these emails. I need to answer these emails. So that's how I'm problematizing my research. I'm thinking about the social environment and the obligations we feel and we co-create in the workplace that make us relate to technology in ways that are unhealthy for us.
Okay, so the problem here is self, because we're the ones who then think to ourselves, I need to answer all those emails, I need to do this. And then you look at the language that's been used in the emails and you react towards that, you work yourself up. So really, the psychological element here is self, the individual is the problem.
I am proposing a radical perspective to stress and technostress, which is stress is made and technostress is made in the workplace.
Okay.
The way we interact with each other and the way we obligate each other, consciously or unconsciously. This is not to say that the psychological perspective is wrong in any ways. It's just to say, what if we played with this new perspective? What if we thought of stress as something that we are creating? What results are we going to get from that? And actually, I'm pretty excited about the kind of results that I've got by looking at technostress from this radically different perspective.
Okay, so what were your results? Let's go there because you're excited. What were the results? Drum roll.
So one of my major contributions was the fact that I discovered that a lot of employees consider technostress as their own responsibility, when in fact it shouldn't. So they think it's only them that receive this many emails, or it's only them that have to deal with technology crashing. And so they individualize this. Sometimes they individualize shame, or they come up with strategies to avoid stress, which creates even more stress for everybody else. For example, because they want to avoid being overloaded with emails when they come back from vacation, some of them read their emails the day prior to them coming back from vacation. So what that does is that makes everybody else want to do the same, because you don't want to be left behind, unfortunately. Yeah. So that would be one of the major contributions. Another one would be exactly this, the new sociological perspective on technostress. And so far we have two other streams, which is psychological or neurophysiologically. But I'm coming with a new ontology, epistemology, methodology. Sorry.
I struggle with that too. I have to go methodology and then say it then after.
Yeah, new way of looking at technostress, which is in itself is a contribution to my research field. And another part is that I am actually defining obligations, and I'm using them as a way to analyze my data, which has been quite exciting as well.
When we look at work culture, individuals create work culture, which you've touched on, to say people, they'll go on holiday and then the day before they will do that. Isn't that the responsibility of the organization to say, do you know what? When you're on holiday, you're on annual leave. We're paying you to be on annual leave. You pick up your emails when you come in. So would you agree that it's the responsibility of the organization when it comes to well-being instead of the individuals?
That's a difficult one to answer, I would say. And it's not something that I've looked at in particular in my research. Personally, or I don't know, my perspective is neither on the organization level nor on the individual, but it's the interplay between the two. So I think a lot of organizations do have these policies in place. But then individuals, they come up with their own habits that they don't even think about, that actually overrule the policies that organizations put in place. Now, of course, that you can actually have a very kind leader who's going to keep on telling you, hey, when you're on vacation, you're on vacation. And they're not going to send you emails while you're on vacation either.
Yeah, so it works both ways. But I guess I'm just thinking, suck them all. If you're breaching policies and procedures, we should just get rid of you and get people who actually adhere. But I guess in terms of the entire population, we're all at fault. So it is the individual. That's what I'm getting from here. I get what you're saying in terms of interaction, but it goes back to the onus is actually on the individual, because you're choosing to breach policy and procedure. They're there for a reason, and you're opting to respond back. And if your boss is doing the same, suck both of them, get rid of them. Because both of them, they don't care about the other's well-being. They're just thinking of KPI.
I think the fun part about the choice is that unless you are aware of the options, you don't really have a choice. You're not really making a choice. And I think that when we onboard employees, I've been a practitioner myself. When I was onboarded, nobody told me, we don't expect you to answer emails in the weekend. Or they did tell me a bunch of things, and then some of those things were followed and some of those weren't. So what's the fun part about obligations is that some of them are very visible. Like we observe somebody doing something and we might want to do the same. But some of them are so unconscious that we might have a feeling that things should be in a certain way, but we can't put words on why do we do the things we do. So I don't think it's the self. I don't think it's the work culture or the environment. I think, again, it's the interplay between the two. And technology plays a very important part in here. What I've noticed recently by talking to practitioners is that, for example, a lot of meetings, a lot of practitioners, they complain about having back-to-back meetings.
Yeah.
And then if you look at how people's calendar is built, let's take Outlook, because I think a lot of us use Outlook. Inbuilt option that you have is the 1 hour meeting. So you can also think about how that 1 hour meeting by default has actually shaped the work culture. So was it the organization, or was it the individual, or was it the technology? Who was it? But a lot of people have back-to-back meetings. Some of them don't even have time to go to the bathroom, and it's not even a joke.
See, I see that a bit different. So I've worked in industry before I came back into education. I would say probably 7 to 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And my diary is my diary, that's person. So therefore, all my meetings, I knew I would, book in 30 minutes and have 30 minutes for a breather after. If it's meant to be an hour, or some meetings, they are 2 hours, because, it's a lot of changes that are, going to put in place. But I would put 30 minutes review, after, just to get myself to also, because I can't move from meeting to meeting. Otherwise, I'm in a straitjacket. I need time. So I go back to the onus is on the individual. Yes, the technology psychologically tells us that the meeting should be an hour, but I have power and authority over my calendar. Therefore, I should be able to say 30 minutes is more than enough of talking time, because as we know, based on research, the mind can only cope for about 40 to 45 minutes before you clock off. So therefore, why am I putting an hour's meeting?
I would say you're an exception.
That's kind of you. Thank you. Now, I'd like to think there are a lot more people who do the same. Or does your research say otherwise? You've done this research. I'm just speaking of self.
I haven't actually interviewed people about back-to-back meetings and written a paper about that, but I do talk with a lot of people on an ongoing basis, and back-to-back meetings are still a concern. And I think the point I was trying to make earlier was about, you saying that it's on us, but it's not usually or only on us. Because, so one thing I find in my research is this culture of engagement, of showing that you are a motivated employee, right? Yeah. So, and a type of obligation that I find is called altercasting. And altercasting can be when we tell someone, motivated employees work in the weekends. So because you want to receive the title of being a motivated employee, then you're going to take on the obligations that come with it. So if the work culture, or if an altercasted obligation is engaged employees have back-to-back meetings, and that's just how we do it here, then it's quite difficult to actually do things differently. And there's another question here, which is also, it depends on your status in the group as well. Because if you're in a leadership position, maybe you have more power over your calendar. But yeah, and it depends also on the power distance between you and your leaders. It depends on a lot of different things.
Yeah, I fully comprehend, and I agree with you to some extent. But when it comes to time and mental health and your abilities as an employee, you are right to say it depends on where you are in terms of levels. However, when you're filling in the job application and someone tells you you're working 37.5 hours or 21 hours per week, that's all you're working, that's what you're here for. So if they're now going outside of that and stating that, you need to work during the weekend, at that point, isn't it wise to put in your resignation to say, do you know what, I'm not capable of this, I need to leave? And also, I'm guessing the individuals, or when you were looking at your research, were they starting up in their careers? Because obviously that's different, because you're hungry, you want to be seen as an engaged employee, but when you're well established, you're not really bothered, except for your bills will make you go to work because you've got a mortgage and family vacation every now and then that you need to fund. But I'm just trying to understand, where were they in their careers?
You're assuming that they are forced to work in the weekends?
No, not forced necessarily. If I'm starting off in my career, I remember when I started off, I was yes, 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 yes. And what happened was I was running on punctured tires.
Mm-hmm.
I was overworked, tired, and I wasn't producing at the level I should have been producing. So I guess what I'm trying to understand here is, were they starting off in their careers, the individuals, or were they already established? Because I guess it's different for everyone.
So yeah, it is different. And for example, the top leaders, they would check their emails because they feel that's their nature of their role,
Okay.
to be available.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas employees, they would check their email outside working hours, out of love for their job, out of curiosity, out of passion. But regardless how you put it, these are both signs of workaholism, and they are both signs of working in an unhealthy manner.
And then in terms of adding on to that, gender-wise, was there a difference in terms of gender, how women perceived and how men perceived the answering of emails, or was it on a level playing field in terms of the balance?
So first I have to say that emails was not necessarily the focus point of my research. It was information and communication technologies in a broader sense, and I haven't noticed any differences between male and female.
Going back to ICT and the systems involved and how they add on to our stress, what were the other key findings that you identified from your research?
One important thing is the fact that a lot of employees felt a lot of anger, frustration. They felt annoyed because ICT sometimes would just stop working, or they had a problem with connecting to a Zoom meeting or connecting to a hybrid meeting and so on. So that would be a big part. Also, they identified quite a lot with the failure of technology. They felt a lot of shame and guilt because of that. And an important thing also, going back to the gender conversation, which again is not something I necessarily looked at in depth in my research, but I did find some things about it in one of my latest research papers, is that, so this is a bigger conversation, but recent technostress research talks about coping mechanisms. How do we cope with technostress? And one of them is distress venting, is being able to air out your frustrations. But what I found in my research was that female, even leaders, they didn't feel that they have access to that way of coping with technostress. They felt that they would rather be more accepted if they dealt with it through humor and sarcasm. So I think that was very interesting in terms of who has access to actually cope with technostress, and it's also a very interesting assumption that previous research has made, which is that we all have access to all these coping mechanisms, but it depends, right? Your culture, your status, your gender.
It does, and in terms of how we deal with things, I guess from my own experience drawing back, I find humor as a way of comfort. That's how I get away from awkward situations in my professional life as well as academia. I found that as a comfort spot where I get my cuddle, and I have peace after. I choose not to go down the road of I need to fight, because then I know that I will get exhausted in doing so. So that's quite interesting in terms of that finding there. In terms of your research then, how does it help the wider community, not just in employment, in academia or at home? Some people just love Twitter, don't they? or Instagram. So how does it, you know, help the wider community, I guess?
Well, I think the idea that stress is made and we are making it together can empower a lot of individuals to actually take the power back, but also to know that they are not alone. So if they're dealing, and if you're dealing with stress at work, most likely there's somebody else in there having the exact same issue as you do. And you can take your power back.
So what is the solution then? Because if I know that someone's getting stressed because emails are popping up, or there's so much deadlines, or, you know, Zoom has just crashed. I mean, today we've had to move over to Teams because Zoom is just acting up, for example. So how does that enable us or empower us to do better?
Well, I don't actually know. My research so far has been on really properly defining the issue. So I haven't focused on solutions. And that's, of course, that would be a whole new 3 years of research about how to do that as well. But funnily enough, that's a question that I get asked a lot. And I take it as a compliment, because in order for someone to think about a solution and want to have a solution, it's because they actually understood the problem. And if they did, that means I've done a great job at describing it. Because I get asked a lot that question, I actually started writing a book that is focusing on solutions. And I think there's a lot of also different types of case studies and different ways of dealing with it. But I mean, it depends also, are we looking at the strategic level? Are we looking at more down-to-earth tactics? Because, for example, I've seen a leader doing something really, really nice. And whenever he would send an email outside working hours, he would write, PS, just because I'm writing my email at this time doesn't mean that you have to work during these hours as well. Another person would say, why don't you just schedule your emails to be sent at 8 a.m. instead? But another solution for me would be to talk about technology as not being as seamless as we think it is.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of companies, and it makes sense, I've also took courses on how to sell technology. We focus so much on the rhetoric that technology is perfect and it's here to solve our problems. And I think that as soon as we become more realistic and we understand that it's not us that are dumb. No, using this word because one of my previous employees used that word to describe herself. She thought she was stupid, and I was like, never ever.
Yeah.
Technology make you feel that way.
No, that's a really good key point to say, you know, don't allow technology to define you, because you're beyond technology. It's meant to assist us, but we've turned it into the wheels in motion that govern us. But in actual effect, we govern technology.
We do, and we have to remember that the people that create technology most likely have a specific profile, and there's a lot of biases as well when technology is created. I think sometimes that users are not being asked enough questions or are not used enough in the development process either. I mean, I don't think they are at this level really thought through, and it makes sense because we're not there where we fully understand how big of an impact technology has on us people. And I think that's where my research also can contribute, because I do uncover a lot of obligations that people feel in relation to ICTs in the workplace, and ICTs developers could also look into that and develop better solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sat here thinking, oh my gosh, this is such an amazing entrepreneurial moment between you and I, because I'm thinking you could make money, or we could make money in terms of training and development for organizations, in particular, those in senior positions, and also employees in terms of how they see and understand technology. I've used a lot of softwares in my time. So I come from a HR background, and I know the challenges that we get when we're implementing new softwares. And then when we're training management in terms of how to use that software, you have a budget, but you always go over budget. because, you know, people don't understand, or there are other technical issues that come with it. And when you're building it to make it fit for the organization itself, you have teething issues because you can't get it right, because the organization grows or it shrinks, or there are other changes as well internally. So I fully see where your research can benefit the community, from employees to investors to, you know, day-to-day running of things. So this is brilliant. You know, I can see where you're going and I love it. And the fact that you're writing a book as well, I'm like, can I buy it? You know, could you take us through that as well, in terms of what your book will discuss, and, you know, what's your vision, you know, in terms of that?
I actually want to go towards entrepreneurship as well, but I also want to stay in academia.
I love this. Get me the popcorn.
So that's a journey in itself. I'm actually taking a pretty intensive course right now for how to build online courses for practitioners. So my book is based on, because people kept on asking, so what is the solution? What is the solution? It's like, great, you got the problem, and now you're on my case, you're finding a solution as well. All right, I'll get to it. And so I took the obligations that I found in my research, and I'm turning each one of them into like a book chapter. So for example, one of the obligations would be the obligation to make technology work at all times. And each of those chapters we talk about how do we co-construct that obligation amongst us? How does that appear in the workplace? And also, what is it that we can do about it? But I think my focus is beyond what we can do about it, because each organization is different. So I plan to propose a set of questions that people can use in their teams to ask themselves and find solutions by themselves. And of course, each of these chapters will also turn into a course module as well. So I would love to have like a bigger course of, I don't know, between 5 and 12 modules, where teams can take one module per week. So they have the theoretical part where they also are given exercises, and then we would have like a live coaching call together to find action points that they can take together as a team. Because a lot of practitioners, they are way too overloaded to stop and think about it. And they don't even know what technostress is, most of them. They are even surprised. And whenever I tell them, hey, technostress is this and that, they go like, that's what I've been feeling. So it's not me, I'm not alone. Like, no, and it's not your fault. So yeah, that's what I'm planning to do in the very immediate future.
No, that's amazing. I mean, in my head, you know, when you mentioned that, that's where I was thinking that, you know, we need training and development to ensure that all of us have the right tools to enable us in our day-to-day. As you said, as a PhD student, you encountered the same or similar stress levels due to technology. So I think it is pivotal that, you know, the wider global community has access to your training material, because it is brilliant in that sense. And I can't wait, you know, for your book to go live and for all your training material to go live in that sense. So kudos to you for identifying the solution and for wanting to teach us so that we can do better with our lives. But going back to your research, in terms of students who are currently, you know, in their first year or second year, what advice would you give them based on your research findings? You're laughing.
Oh. I've had a very interesting journey from my first year to finishing my PhD, because I used to be very, very stressed, and I used to never take things lightly. And then I remember the weeks before having to submit my thesis that I looked at myself and I was like, when did I become this calm person who is not really moved by whatever happens outside? And I think one of the biggest things the biggest shift that happened for me was to really think about the obligations that I put on myself, and to free myself of any types of expectations of having to do things in a specific way. And And that's also in relation to technology, of course, but that's also in relation to how I interact with people, and in relation, like, how do I relate to the outside world.
Yeah.
And of course, being able to set boundaries for yourself and know that you're more than your work, and you're doing a PhD for a reason, probably because you have bigger plans for your life. And in order for you to be there, you have to actually enjoy it as well, and enjoy every day out of it.
I've had conversations with individuals who are still battling what you went through in terms of taking everything seriously, and tying that noose every day to a point where they're like, oh my gosh, I need to take a year off because I can't breathe anymore, and they don't enjoy the process. So that's really wise of you to share that wisdom. So thank you very much. And in terms of advice for anyone who's looking to go through a similar journey in terms of finishing their PhD and being an author, and going through what you're going through now, what advice would you give them?
Most important thing is know what you want out of it, not what everyone else wants out of it for you. And I mean, I've worked a lot with PhDs as well. At some point, I was the PhD chair for like looking into the conditions of PhDs at my university. And I think that a lot of times we get kind of sucked into this environment that requests and requires so much of us. And we are so underpaid and we are so overworked. And sometimes we just have to stop and ask ourselves, what do I want out of this? Because that's actually the most important question to ask. And if whatever comes your way serves your path, then say yes. And if not, and you are able to, then say no. You can always also ask yourself, will this impact my mental health? It's not to say that we are not gonna do any task that we don't enjoy. I've done a lot of tasks that I don't enjoy, for sure.
Yeah.
Find enjoyment in everything. That's also something I tell myself. But it's important that it fits into your bigger puzzle.
You're basically saying conduct a mental health stress test before you opt to say yes, and see whether it fits into your bigger picture. If it doesn't, it's okay to say no. Maybe you might say yes for financial reasons, or just because you need that group of in terms of networking. We all have different reasons, but know that it's short term, it's not long term. So you're not going to endure that for a longer period. It's just maybe 3 months or 6 months. From that perspective, have understanding and awareness is what you're saying, basically.
I think what you just said earlier, that we might say yes because we need the network. I think it's important to also recognize that sometimes the individuals we have in our network that would require us to do something will not necessarily be the individuals that we're going to draw upon their help at a later stage. So what I find now, as I finish my PhD, is that I received help and support to start writing my book, to like people coming to my defense from the most unexpected sources. And it hasn't been the people that I thought, I'm just going to say yes because I want to have their respect, or I want to have them in my network at a later stage.
Wow, that is powerful. So basically you can't plan for tomorrow because you don't know what's coming.
Oh. Just do you, and that's the most important thing. Yeah. I mean, I sometimes I wonder, like, where would science be today if all of us would have the joy of going to work and researching? And I think that's so important, and we owe it to ourselves to be well, to do well, and to choose the kind of things that are actually helping us in our way. So why take on more teaching if you don't need that later on, if you're not going to be a teacher? I think sometimes we can be blinded, or we might have this fear of missing out because, oh my God, all these opportunities. But know yourself first. Know what you want.
Yeah. Be pragmatic, basically.
Yeah.
No, I love it. No, thank you so much. I feel like I'm learning, so don't know about everybody else, but I love those wise words, and I'll keep them really close to my heart because I'm in my first year. So this is really good for me, as I haven't started publishing yet, but I know that I need to make some decisions in terms of the conferences that I need to attend. What do I want to publish? Because obviously that will shape my future. So I can't say yes to everything. So all those questions, I'm already starting to think about them. So this is brilliant. So thank you very much. It's
To add something. It's
uh-huh.
not only about being pragmatic. It's also about following the path of your joy. Because I've had conferences I went to, and they were from a completely different field and discipline. I mean, I'm information systems, and now we're talking sociology, and I didn't know what the heck am I doing here. I'm not a sociologist. I was the only not sociologist at that conference, but it just made me happy to go there, and I went. And then I was able to include in my final dissertation 2 abstracts that were accepted at their conference. And one of them was even nominated for a Best Paper Award, and I was invited to write for their journal. And now I have contributed to 2 different disciplines. So it's not only about being pragmatic, it's also about just follow whatever brings you joy, even though you don't know where it's going to take you right now.
That is brilliant. So think outside the box. You've got an entrepreneurial mind though. So I can see where all of this is coming from. Whereas if somebody doesn't have that mentality, they would just be one way. And I love that, so brilliant. We've come to the end of our PhD Hard Talk for today. And I have to say, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, Dr. Raluca Stana.
Do you want to say hi to the troublemaker who's been...
And hello, Joy. Actually, Joy, I'll call you Dr. Joy as well. Or maybe Sir Joy.
That's why I call him Joy, so I remember how important it is to have joy in my life.
Oh, yes. See, look at that, the referencing. It's impeccable. But thank you very much. And yeah, it was lovely. Hopefully we can speak to you once the book is published, and we can talk about, the training material, where that's going as well. So thank you very much.
And I wish you all the best in your PhD, and reach out if I can help with anything.
Definitely, I'll be in contact.